Hello, if like me you save nuts and bolts and screws in jars, springs and things, it's handy to have a tray that you can empty them out. You can sort out the ones that you want, and if you make the tray in the shape of a chute, it's a simple matter of putting them back into the jar. Whenever I'm painting the house, I always use a paint kettle. That's far easier than directly out of the tins, but when you've got little tins like this, it's not worth the cleaning up. But they're not very convenient to take up a ladder and hold, especially in a paint kettle. It can swing about. But I saw this idea which I quite liked, and you can see it's a piece of wood, and this shape bandsaw there, it's quite a heavy piece of wood, and on the top is screwed up, in this case, a plastic lid. And assuming that's the run of the ladder, it sits on the ladder and your tin sits on top, and it's far more stable than you might at first think. However, if you're a belt and braces man like me, before you screw the top of that on, sink a magnet in the top. Discs of wood cut out on the bandsaw, screwed off centre, make ideal gravity jam cleats for hand saws and the like. From time to time I do a little bit of spraying, and here's a very cheap low pressure spray gun. I've had it for many years. They work very well considering how cheap they're made. But I wonder if you're naughty like me, and when you're finished with them, you put thinners in the reservoir, you pull the trigger several times, you shake them up, turn them upside down. In other words, you're cleaning the nozzle. But, and if you're really naughty, you're probably spraying it up against a door or a wall. And when you think about it, it's an awful waste of thinners. And a simple tip is to get a piece of pipe that will fit the end of the spray gun, and now you can spray the thinners back into a tin, and although it's lightly contaminated, it can be used for cleaning another time. Still on the subject of painting, I like natural brushes for painting. I don't like synthetic bristles. They're always too sloppy and too long for me, and it pays to look after brushes and clean them when you're finished. Cheap brushes are just simply no good at all. And what I do is I drill their wooden handles. These come from the range. They're quite good value for down there. I drill them so that it'll take a piece of rod or a nail, and then I can suspend them in a jar so that they don't touch the bottom. And then when I put some thinners in, or brush cleaner, I don't distort the shape of the bristles. In other words, they still end up like that years later. But eventually it gets to the stage where you'll get like that, and although the ends are pretty supple, in the heel of this it's really hard, and you could soak that in some paint stripper and so forth, but is it actually worth it when they only perhaps cost $1.20, $1.30 a piece? However, I never chuck these away, and although they're absolutely useless for any sort of painting, they are absolutely first class if you're fiberglassing, because when you're using fiberglass, of course, you can only use them the once, because once it's cured it's like a hammer. So save those for fiberglassing. If you're ever fitting a piece of glass, and pretend that piece of plastic is glass, that's what I had at hand, and it's on an angle such as a greenhouse roof, skylight or something, and you've cut it to what you think is the right size, but you've allowed a little bit extra for expansion and putty and so forth, and you've dropped it into the frame, How do you get it out of the frame? Well, if you don't get underneath, you can just push it up. Or if you've got someone else, you can just push it up, or you can put a blob of putty on it and pull it out. You've got to clean it off, or you could use a little suction pad. But a very simple little tip is a piece of tape, and I'll use black tape here so it shows up better. And if you stick the piece of tape down, come across, fold it over, you've now got a little tab, and you can pull the glass out easily. Okay, time for a quick waffle to explain this one. Let's put that there. For a couple of years I worked for a boat firm. I was young at the time and met some very experienced, clever guys that, you know, they've taught me quite a lot, and I very much appreciate that. And at the time they were building what can only be described as a vulgar floating gin palace. It was commissioned by a multi-millionaire who knew nothing whatsoever about boats. In fact, he knew nothing whatsoever apart from how to make money. But he had no taste, and he employed a young chap, as a designer, architect, call him what you will, for supervising the fitment of this craft. And he had less idea than the owner. Anyway, he was a bumptious little bloke, and any time he could bring him down a peg or two, you know, I'm afraid I was a culprit there too. Anyway, cut the waffle short. In this saloon of this floating monstrosity was an enormous pink buttoned upholstery type of settee that ran along one bulkhead of the saloon, and I think it was a chandelier hung on top. Did I say the guy had no taste? Anyway, this settee arrangement, and this piece of board just represents the top of it, butted up against the bulkhead, and the other side of the bulkhead was the galley, and the owner wanted a microwave oven set flush into the bulkhead, weaken it in my opinion, but there you go. Set flush into the bulkhead, so the innards were under this settee. And it was an unusual microwave because it was dual voltage. It was 24 volts DC, which was the main rail of the boat in question, but you could also run it on 240, 250 volts AC, and the boat had 13 amp ring mains throughout as well. Quite ridiculous, but there we are. Anyway, in order to change from one voltage to the other, when you wanted mains in port, there was a switch on top of the microwave. Well, in order to get access to this switch, we had to go through this top. And what I've done here, don't know if this will zoom in a little bit, I cut a little hatch in order to gain access to the switch. Well, this designer bloke comes along, trying to imagine all this as exotic woods, veneers, and he come along and he says, oh yeah, that's okay, he says, but hang on, he says, how's the owner going to get that out? He says, that's stupid, he says, that's, what's he supposed to do, get a knife? He says, he's supposed to get it out. So, without saying a word and a bit nonchalantly, I just pushed on the corner and took that out. You can see what I've done. I've just notched the rail, which means it pivots on that point. Well, we tried a few of these sort of suggestions on the guy, and after about a month he tended to leave us alone so we could get on with it. But I think the whole thing turned out a complete disaster. I did go on its sea trials, but with all the rubbish that the owner had pumped into this thing, it was overweight, sailed like an absolute pig. So I got out because, let's face it, nobody likes an I told you so. But this guy just simply bought what he wanted. He's probably dead now because he was older than me. He was fat, balding, and had a blonde young trophy wife. Well, you got the picture, haven't you? Right, enough waffle, back to the tips. While still on the subject of boats, the craft in question was fiberglass. This is only thin stuff, but it represents the same idea. Anything to do with boats, there's nothing straight, it's all curves and compound angles. And the waterline was marked on the outside of the hull, calculated by the water displacement and the designer. But of course inside, if you want to drill a fitting, and the specifications said it had to be 3 inches above the waterline, how do you find out where that is? And this particular craft had a wet room, and the tray had to be 3 inches above the waterline. So where do you put the skin fitting? Well, if you get someone to hold a magnet on the inside of the hull, being fiberglass, and you throw a load of steel pins at it, you'll have 1 or 2 stick to the outside of the hull, drawn by the magnetism. You can now measure the distance it is, and you can shout to the guy inside, up a bit, up a bit, up a bit, up a bit, stop! And now you can go inside, mark round the magnet, and you knew the skin fitting was exactly the distance it was calculated to be from the outside waterline. Handy little tip. My next tip will save you an absolute fortune. Yeah, right, well, if I knew that, I could change my name from poor old chap to something else. My wallet's taken a right bashing this morning. It's only up as 9. I've just bought road tax from my car. A piece of paper, £225 for a bit of paper to stick on the windscreen. I didn't pay that for the car. I've just had to pay that again for insurance. I had to pay it again for half a dozen spare parts and an MOT. And that's before I put a litre of petrol in at £1.38 a litre. Grief, I'm going wrong somewhere here, guys. I think I'm going to have to charge for these pearls of wisdom. Otherwise I can see it's me and Shanks's pony, that's for sure. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.